Hey there, everyone. Very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all are joining us globally. I am Parth Varu, Events and Program Manager for Microsoft Reactor Bengaluru. I welcome you all to yet another episode of Kickstart Your Business with Azure, a guide for new professionals by Kavisha Mathur. But before we start our today's event, let's go through our code of conduct. We are all here to learn together, participate together. So please be respectful of other people's views, understanding their differences. Be kind and considerate in a way we all engage. Yes, we do encourage you all to participate. Please drop all your questions in the chat section and we'll pick it up from there. Let's not wait more. I would like to bring in Kavisha, our speaker for today's session. Hey, hi Kavisha, how are you doing? I think you are on mute.
Yeah. Am I audible now?
Yep, we can hear you. Perfect.
Hi guys. Hi Parth.
Hi.
Great to be here.
So yes, let's get started, Kavisha. You have shared your screen. I'd like to bring it up on the screen.
Yeah.
Yep. Here is your. The floor is all yours.
Yeah. Hi guys. So today's session is about kickstarting your business with Azure, a guide for new professionals. So the target audience, I see that a lot of people that had signed up for this were a few seasoned professionals and not the first time that they were coming in on Meetup. But yeah, the target audience for this is for anyone who is looking for using Azure as the infrastructure or the guide for a new startup that they're or any buzzing idea that they have. Um, so that's that. Now let's see what we are going to cover in this session before. So the agenda for today, the session will run around 45 minutes to 1 hour, is introduction to Azure, and I hope everyone has some idea or has at least heard what Azure is. Primarily, it will be about the key Azure services that are provided, especially for startups or new businesses, and building and deploying our first application. I would want to go through a demo for this, but because of the time constraints that we have, I will be giving the resources and also be walking through that resources that is provided by Microsoft itself. So it will be easy for you to find these resources on a simple Google search. And what are the scalability and cost management for any new business that is entering this realm, right? I'll be taking questions at the end of the session. I am not able to see the chat box for now, so you can always feel free to drop any questions that you have in the chat. So now that we're done with the agenda, so Azure, as we all know, and is Microsoft's cloud computing platform, which provides a range of services that can be used not just by new startups that has been told inside. It's professionals from any walk of their career, even. I work in a multinational company which has over 4 lakh employees, and we still use Azure and its services. So it has a variety of services to cater to a large audience. So, but why choose Azure, right? Because there are a lot of competitors in the market. The biggest one probably is AWS, right? In fact, recently, even my company had a migration from AWS to Azure. So, what was the reason behind this? Why are more and more people moving towards Azure, and what are the key features that it has, right? So, uh, some of the benefits are that now we know that there are a lot of different products that Microsoft has in the professional space, right? So Azure is very easily integrable, or it has a seamless interaction and integration with all of the application and products that Microsoft Azure has a seamless integration with Microsoft products, right? So it's easy to use, And also it's also very cost effective for especially new businesses, because of the different plans they provide that we'll be covering eventually. Then it's extremely secure, it has a global reach, so you will be surprised to listen that there are around 60 data centers of for keeping Azure in place. And it's compliant with the standards, around 90 industry standards. That is why Azure certifications or any product of Azure is extremely commended in the industry, because of the industry compliance that it has. Next, it has the unique features that I've already covered, that it has seamless integration. And we know that the market position of Azure is extremely strong. Microsoft is in fact one of the biggest shareholders, and it's one of the leading cloud service providers as well. And that is why it's better than AWS. But again, this depends from the company to company, and it's based on your requirements. Uh, so let's go ahead. And some of the Azure services, right? So Azure provides many services. We'll be covering a ton of services in this session. So the first thing is that if I'm a new professional, now these services, when it's bought by by a company, a huge MNC, these services usually have some sort of contract or payments that the company itself purchases for the employees. But for any new professional, how can, or for any new startup, how can they avail these services? Right. So the first thing is that there is something called Microsoft for startups. Let me show that as well. In fact, Microsoft for Startups is a hub for any startup that is looking for an investment. Um, and so it has different credits that it provides, like depending on where you are and what you purchase. It gives you different credits on different platforms like LinkedIn Premium or on GitHub, Microsoft 365, so on and so forth. So apart from that, by default, when you enter when you have a account in Azure, you will be able to choose which uh, kind of service you want. And there is by default $200 that is allocated to your account. So let's see what are the services that are provided. But before that, let's see, for any new company, right? What do you exactly mean by a service? And a startup, which service will it essentially be requiring, right? So uh, if suppose I have a startup idea of making a fitness app, okay, which has nutrition plan based on plans, and it takes different individual user data and goals, uh, and it's basically personalized to my needs, right? So what all will I require for this application? Now this application could be a web based app, it could be a mobile application. So each of both, on both the platforms, I'll require user registration and profile management. Then I'll require the all of the health, like before, as soon as you enter any fitness app, it asks you for your height, weight, gender, um, so on and so forth. So all of this data has to be collected from the users. Then this data has to be stored, right? Because based on this data itself, you're going to provide personalized plans for nutrition, for any fitness goal. And before that, you're supposed to process even a simple processing, like just finding out the BMI of this person based on the height and the weight, is also processing and analysis, right? We need machine learning for personalized recommendations. Now, if it's a personalized wellness app, and if I have said that I can only gym on 2 days, and I want to do yoga on the rest of the three, make me a plan that fits my needs. So you need machine learning algorithms to make me a food plan according to what I have entered. So, like you can see, this can be extended for any app or any idea that you have. You will have these basic things like you would user registration, authentication, multi-factor authentication with the user, so and notifications. So there has to be constant push notifications to keep bringing the users back. The user dashboard so that the user is able to see. So for each of these. Uh, for each of these tasks that you want to do, or when you're building up an idea, or if you already have an existing company, each of this has a service that is running behind it, right? And now there is what has come into picture are microservices as well, right? Because all of this have to be disjoint. It has to be it should be a single service that they don't get bundled up. We don't have the monolithic architecture anymore. So Azure provides for user registration, it provides the Active Directory, health data collection. It provides IoT hub. Now you might be wondering, where does IoT come into picture? Now it could be your smart watch, right? It is an IoT device, and it collects your heart rate, your calories burnt, and so on. This data is stored in the SQL database, again provided by Azure. Then we have data processing and analysis. This is also given by Azure Stream Analytics. So, what the intention of this slide is that uh, any startup idea that you have can easily be, with the help of Azure, you can easily support it. And this is the culture that is being promoted by Microsoft as well, right? So that is why the incubation Microsoft for startups itself is also, on the forefront of pushing startups. So now let us see where these different like AKS, Azure Kubernetes services, where can you find them, and how will you start using them, right? So let's go into a little live demo. So when you come to your Azure portal and you make uh, account on it. So I made an account on it, and I am still using a student profile for this. But based on the company that you are for, you could put in what kind of payment options and what kind of plan you're choosing. So my account has around $200 credits. So it could vary from account to account. So when you come here, you can easily, let's go to Microsoft Azure itself. This is the home portal. And here in the hamburger toolbar, you can see some of the most commonly used services that are used by people. Your app services, your resource groups, your AI services, virtual machines. Um, and you'll be surprised to know there are around 55 free services, if I'm not wrong, and around 130 or more services that are provided, um, uh, you know for different categories. Like, for if you want to integrate a AI custom chatbot to our startup idea, right? That uh, you could easily do using these services. For analytics, now analysis of this data, you have big data processing, you have data exploration, real time analytics. So multiple categories, and every single category has a dozen of Azure services that are provided, right? Different app services that are provided. Just halting here for any questions, because I'm not able to see the chatbot. But Part, let me know if there is any issue in the voice or video, etc. Yeah. So yeah, we have different for databases. We have you have Cosmos DB, you have SQL support that Azure gives. We will be going through how to create it from ground up. So we will be covering that as well. So we're going to keep this startup idea itself as the key point for our discussion today. The for our discussion today. Um, Now let's go into some three very major services. We will be going into a slight demo of sort. Um, so, like I said, different services and products, right? Like you saw numerous categories over here. There is around 15 to 20 categories that will be required. But when you're starting small and when you've just started, there are four major pillars that you need to, put in place, right? You want to make sure that for my startup, I have a virtual machine or an app service which is deployed on Azure, so that any person from any laptop, whether I have a MacBook or if there is someone with a Windows notebook or any device, is easily able to log into that virtual machine, provided you are added in that user group and able to use it. So compute power, and since this infrastructure that Azure provides is managed by Azure itself, you don't have to pay any cost for the desktop, for the infrastructure, for the computation power that you have, and it's a pay as you go model. Okay, which we'll be touching base with in some time. So the compute, when you're trying to set up your service or when you're setting up your product, you need an app service or a container that is orchestrated again by AKS, that is Azure Kubernetes Service, for your product. So these are the four most commonly used apps services in the compute vertical. Then you want to store all of this data that you're getting, right? Like for our startup idea, we had a lot of data coming in um for um, and temporary storage. You don't need all of the data, you just need to keep it for maybe computation purpose, for some processing or data analysis purpose, right? So all of that for storage is provided by file, disk, and blobs. um, Coming to databases, like we saw, we've seen Cosmo DB on Azure products. Then we have some NoSQL like Cassandra. We have multiple SQL and NoSQL products that Azure provides. And for networking, it provides VPN, and it works itself on VPN, that is your virtual private network, as opposed to AWS that works on VPC. This one, Azure works on your virtual networks, so it's easier to use as well. Um, yeah. So, like you can see here, take a moment to see the different products that or services that it provides, and where your service might lie. Now, does it lie in the infra IaaS category, your PaaS, that is your platform as a service category, or which category does it fall under? So, assuming you have given a brief look at this diagram, uh, infrastructure as a service, like I said, the virtual machine that you're working on, it's the cost and the infrastructure is completely built by Microsoft. You don't have to. So when you create a virtual machine, which we'll be looking at, you have to enter things like the GPU that you require, the RAM or the processing that it requires, which area it is in, what are some of the security policies, what is the role based authentication that you want, that is your RBAC that you want, etc. All of this is taken care by Azure itself. Then we have the platform, right? So once you create your app, you want it to be containerized. Right now, containerization orchestration using Docker and Kubernetes is a completely different uh, you know lecture altogether. But in brief, this cloud service is basically to orchestrate the different nodes that you have, so that you can parallelly compute uh, the amount of data that you're getting. So that is why Azure Container Apps or the Docker AKS comes into picture. Like you can see, there's a lot of database options also, whether it's Redis, SQL database, Postgres, Cosmos DB that it is provides. Now, if suppose you do have all of this in place, right, you cannot keep deploying your code on your virtual machine, or you cannot keep manually typing in the commands to connect to your Kubernetes K9s. You need something to automatically be deploying this, and you need to have a continuous integration and continuous deployment. That means that if there are 5 users that are working on a single product, you need to be able to accommodate all 5 of their changes without losing any change. It has to be persistent. So for that we have that is why Azure works really well, because on Visual Studio Code and GitHub it has a lot of integration tools that it provides. So different IDs, like you can see Visual Studio Code is written Eclipse, IntelliJ. So whichever platform you are on, it is it provides different tools. But before you start off and try to add a service, we need to see what is the resource group. And a- you cannot just, so when you go to your portal over here, suppose I want to add, um, let's see what we can add. If I want to add a virtual machine for my company, when I'm creating a virtual machine, we will be required. Okay, let's see. Yeah, it is asking me for something called a resource group, right? So your subscription, like I said, based on the different subscriptions, you have different credits. Mine is Azure for students for now. There is access for all and 3 more subscription types that are there. So what is this resource group is the question that we're addressing right now. Um, so here is the official documentation of what a resource group is, and there's a lot of text here, but basically a resource group is a logical container that can hold. So suppose your company requires different app services, right? It requires your SQL database, the startup idea that we have requires your database, it wants the IoT services and all, right? So there has to be a common point or a common logical container, right, for these bulk operations, for continuous deployment, for the cost management. So for that, resource groups come under picture, and you have to create a resource group. Now, since this session is not covering a demo, for those of you who do not have a Microsoft account, which could take some time to set up, could just see this documentation for creating a resource group before you add on any service to it. So yeah, so let me show how we can create a resource group. I have a resource group already in place. We'll be using that itself. But like you can see over here, Azure Services, there's a resource group option. And here I already have a resource for this session. But when you create a resource, uh, it's pretty simple. You just name your resource and you click on review and create. So suppose mine is Reactor app. I review and create it, and once the validation is passed, I can directly create it. So it's pretty simple. It's on your account. It's directly added. These are the things that are required with subscription. It is on, so that it can take the credits from the same account, right? So the next is that now I want to, once we have created the resource group, we want to attach an app service to it, right? So the app service for our startup could be something like creating a web app. Okay, now when I'm trying to create a web app or any sort of application, yeah, so there are different app services as well. Now maybe mine is a reactive service, but you could have a static web app. In the case of a static web app, uh, so suppose you have a static web app, and it has static content like your HTML, your images, your JavaScript. It is constantly loading. and any code change that you're doing has to constantly be updated using the GitHub Actions. In that case, that also is accommodated if your startup or if your application is on a primitive level. So you can also give in static web app. Over here, I am just choosing the web app or application option, and yeah, so subscription is by default for me right now. Suppose I create the Reactor web app or the Reactor app, that is a new resource group I've created just now. And the name of the app could be my health tracker, right? So, okay, it has to comply with a few rules and regulations. So, what we are going to see over here primarily are the pricing plans and the different runtime stacks and operating systems that you have. Over here, you'll be able to see the different pricing plans as well. So when you create an app service, by default, so suppose I have $200 credit, which might translate to around 16,000 rupees, right? For so I can, if suppose I take a pricing plan that has this much, it has around 2 GB memory, and different specifications that you can see over here, it would cost me around 1,000 rupees per month. In that way, I could exhaust, just using my app service, I could exhaust my entire credits in just 1.5 year. So for that, you need to, after 1.5 years, what do we do? How do I migrate from this account to that? That also is provided by Azure itself. But the point is that just when you're starting off, if suppose you have 1,500 or 150,000 credits, it would last you enough for you to get a funding, for you to raise some funding, and then migrate to a different better pricing plan as well, right? So we're going to touch base with this in detail now. But before that, like I said, the first question that we were answering was what is the resource group and why it's important. So, like I said, resource group for your organization, so that it's built, so that there's logical deployment. It's a logical container where you have this continuous deployment. So, these are where all your services are going to be attached and built with. Uh, Now, for example, we have Azure App Services that we were checking right now, right? So it's fully managed. Now, no matter what my code is written in, whether it's written in Python, whether it's written in .NET, whether it's a completely Node.js application, um, over here you will have uh, the option to choose that. It's going to come a little later in the next when we're deploying it. Uh, Over here, yeah, right here. So in the runtime stack itself, you can check that, okay, my application is in Python, so I choose uh, Python as my runtime stack. So all this is supported by Azure. The next is it's easy to deploy. Like you can see, just based on the click, just by a click, next deployment, we'll be able to do this. The next is that you can host these web applications. We'll also be checking now, if suppose I have a static web application, okay, or like the Microsoft Reactor website itself. My session is already loaded and it probably has static content like my name, my introduction, etc. So how do I make sure that now for the next Reactor session that we want the YouTube link to it, the Reactor link to it, the session details, the link to register for it. For that, Azure API is also there, where when I create an API, we directly say that, okay, using this API, every time this endpoint is clicked, you take me to this website. So a website which is for for the registration, right? So you can easily integrate that as well. Azure Functions is another service that is used commonly. Uh, and we have SQL database. This is important as well. So it's a fully managed relational database. Like I told, if you can use a NoSQL server as well. So non-relational database, and it has AI powered performance optimization. So that database, if you want quick analysis of some data, it has AI tools available as well. So suppose you want to filter out some data, sort out some data, and it's highly, now when we talk about database and when you have critical data that is in your database, you want it to be secure and you want it to be scalable. Today, if I've just started off, I have 2 users. So on my database, I'm going to have information only about the users. But tomorrow, if I have 1,000 people using my health tracker app, I should be able to scale it, right? And to store and manage relational data, running complex queries. If, in the case of SQL, if you're well versed with SQL, then you will know that there could be multiple nested queries that we have to, find information about our uh, information about our users, right? So yeah, that is another case. Yeah. So now coming to creation of our web app, right? So this is the exact same screen that we were seeing over here. When creating web app, these are the things that you require: your web app name, your runtime stack, operating system, region. Uh, we know that name is something that has to be given by us. Runtime stack is the language that your application is in. Operating system is the one that you want it to run in, whether it's Linux or Windows. And based on that itself, you're going to get your shell as well, right? So the commands on your terminal could be different from Windows on Windows and on Linux. So if you have or if you're well versed with Linux commands, then you should be using going for Linux. Um, so suppose our web application that we have created in our um, startup idea, his it has a request that's coming in, right? That I want to create a new user, or I want to get a new diet plan, right? So this request is queued in the service bus, and this is an event driven architecture. So this function, a function processes a request, means that if, over here, we a few slides back, there were Azure functions, right? So this is where it comes into play. So whatever information that you're getting uh, using the web app service, it is stored in the SQL database, and the Azure function is going to trigger whatever processing you want. Now it could be either sending an output to Cosmos DB, it could be storing it in the database, it could be doing some analysis. All of that is done by this Azure function. So this is something how our architecture would look, right? So now that our idea is coming, don't you think our idea is coming in place a bit, and we can see where Azure is helping us out, right? So there are different management tools now. Say for example, now we want to add a chatbot, right, to our startup idea. And so how am I going to, or the boom in AI and machine learning, I want it to have a uh, like we already saw that we want personalized recommendations and plans, right? So for that, again, it provides a lot of tools: Azure chatbot, Azure DevOps, Azure monitor, advisor. And for security compliance also, we need so whenever you create an application or when you start creating any organization, you have physical security. Any person who wants to penetrate to get into the data of that organization, right, will first have to bypass physical security, identity and access. So if I don't have access to that data, I clearly, identity access management will not be provided. It has to go through your network security. So your network itself might not allow such attackers. Then it has to have access to that application and then to the data. So for your application to be secured, Azure provides your Azure Key Vault, the Defender, Sentinel, etc. Now creating back to creating our web app. Um, since we are not able to do a complete live demo, here is the link for um, the this thing. This can easily be found on a simple Google search by hosting a web application with Azure App Service. So suppose I start creating a web app in the Azure portal. So in our demo, we have already covered that, how we can give the pricing, how we can give the operating system or runtime stack, etc. is done. What is the next step, right? So uh, yeah, so once we go to the Azure portal, and these were the things that we saw, right? The resource group, the name, where we are publishing it, that part. Yeah. So this was the publish thing, right? So if you're publishing it as a container, if you're publishing it as a code or a static web app, that is also provided by Azure itself. So you can see over here, all of this we have already covered. Now, what next, right? So I had chosen Python as something that we're creating our fitness tracker in, right? So for Python, after we choose all of this and we go to this next deployment button over here, how does what are the next steps, right? So once it's deployed directly, we can now connect it to our, suppose, Visual Studio Code, right? So whatever application that I have on my Visual Studio Code itself, I'll have a few .env files, right? Suppose I want the open API, the key for the AI chatbot. It has to be secure, so I'll put it in my .env file. The architecture could look like I have my PyCache, my .env file, my index.html, which is probably your first home screen. Okay, so all of those files. Um, Suppose we are using Flask for our front end. So for um these are the files that you have for hello world, right? So but how do I connect this Visual Studio Code to the Azure app service that we're creating over here? So after you commit to the after you commit to Git, which we have uh, covered over here, right? So when you're creating your web app itself, there are options to add Git in your over here, right? So continuous deployment and CI and CD, we have an option of choosing GitHub as our uh, uh, CI/CD tool. So that is the one that we're planning to use for this demo. So that is why we have your Git init, your Git add, your Git commit, uh, right? So once you have committed to your PR or your branch on your GitHub uh, repository, uh, how do we implement this and how do I connect to the shell of Azure, right? So uh, this link that you will find in the Azure Microsoft Learning itself is a great way to start, since we do not have enough time to cover uh, a full-fledged demo. This we've covered around 50 to 60% of it. You can explore the Microsoft website for the same, right? So now that a basis of a web application has been created, our fitness tracker has been created, deploying the application using GitHub or Bitbucket or local Git has also been done. uh, let's see another tool, right? Now again, this would be something I cover in a larger session where we have a complete startup idea itself, where we are going to uh, create an AI assistant where from the user to the transcription and Azure speed service is provided. This is something that we'll be covering in a different session, not for today. um, so again, cost management, we have already seen that each of these, yeah, each of these VMs or any scalable issue that anything that you have to scale up or scale down. It's a pay as you go practice. You don't have to pay a lump sum amount, since Azure takes care of this. And you can optimize your VM sizes, you can optimize based on the credits that you have. So it's important that you make sure that your credits don't run out. Like I said, 1,000 rupees per month, you wouldn't realize how exhausting it would be when you're using different microservices and different services that Azure is providing. It could last you a month or two. So it's important that you make sure that you don't drain out your you know credit card, because usually they ask your credit card details when you're signing up for this. So, and some of the tips could be that you scale down during peak, uh, uh, during off peak hours, the times that you don't need those pods running on K9s, scale them down. You can restart the deployment again when required, and there are peak hours, right? So again, some of the frequently asked questions in this is, how do I choose the right Azure service, right? So in our startup, we wanted user authentication, some APIs, etc. So what fits your uh, startup, or what fits your journey? We have already seen that there are around 130 services that we're seeing over here, right? So you can explore this portal, or Azure portal, to have a better understanding for it. Best practices, like I said, scaling down, making sure you're on the correct billing plan, and how to ensure my application is secure. Make sure that you have RBAC on at all times, role-based authentication service. On, so that you're not it's not open to the public. Your environment variable keys are not your .env file is not pushed on GitHub directly, which is open access for everybody, or it's on a public repository. Your API keys are not usually we have two API keys that are provided, for example. So if you're whichever API key you're using, make sure that it is not publicly available and it's on private mode. So yeah, that's it from my side. I'd be glad to take questions now, so I'm opening the floor for that. Um, Part, would you like to help me in taking up questions? Or okay, I see a few. Uh, so the links for everything has been provided already by Microsoft, by the team itself, right? So you can find all of the links over there. Um, Most of the links are easily accessible on Google. I haven't kept anything extremely complex, because the documentation of Microsoft could be hard. Uh, Thank you, Subhash. Um, Glad having you here. Hope you learned something different and new.
Hi, Kavisha. Thank you so much. Final call for everyone to ask questions. If you have any questions, please drop it in the comment section or in the chat section. We'll pick it up from there. Meanwhile, there are few links posted, like about the cloud computing, to just get started for you. And there is also a link for if you're planning your startup for Azure for Business. And yes, there is also a link for Founders Hub. Microsoft for Startups Founders Hub is a beautiful community where you all can start your startup journey. It starts from 1K USD, goes to 150K USD. So you all can check in via LinkedIn and start your startup. And yes, I don't see any questions coming up. So yes, call for a wrap. Thank you, Kavisha. Thank you so much for an exciting session. And yes, thank you, folks. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you.